G'day and welcome to Not the Farmer's Wife podcast. I'm CJ Steedman and I'm not the farmer's wife, I'm the farmer. I'm also a mum to MJ and OJ and a full-time off-farm worker. And like most farmers, I'm able to farm with the help of my family and my partner, who I call the handy helper. On Mojo Homestead, we grow chickens, goats, cows and bees, and we do it using regenerative agriculture and holistic management practices. If, like me, you love all things farming and homesteading, then we'd love to have you along for the ride. So let's get farming. G'day everyone and welcome to another episode of Not the Farmer's Wife. It is episode 98.
Wow.
2 more and we get to 100. And this week, as you can see, I have, for those that are watching on YouTube, for those that are listening, I have the handy helper here with me. Spirit fingering. Oh, that just sounds wrong. I just realised how bad that sounds. All right. We're in the gutter already, folks. So this week we're talking about farming myths. You all right? Do you need a moment? We're talking about farming myths. And the reason we're talking about that is because last week I got my first proper troll.
Stalker.
So
she's famous now.
Yeah, like I said,
first stalker.
The handy helper was a bit worried. He's like, should I be bothered by this person insulting you over, online? And I said, no, it means I've made it. I finally made it when somebody starts calling me nasty names. So I put out little snips. If you haven't seen, I put out little snips about the podcast, like what we've discussed. There's a system called Descript where you can do capture little snippets, like clips of the podcast and post that online for social media. And I posted something about cows burping versus millionaires or billionaires jet planes, and somebody took exception to what I said. And obviously maybe he's a billionaire and owns a jet and wants to be able to fly it without worrying about the fact that he's putting out more admissions than a cow burping. So he called me a fat something. He called me fat, which, I'm not the smallest girl in the world, but I wouldn't say I'm huge. And yeah, how could he tell from my face? But anyway,
yeah.
But he called me fat and called me some other nasty names. And I had a bit of a laugh because straight away when I was talking to the handy helper about it afterwards, like the next day when I saw it, he was like, should I be worried? And I was like, no, that means I've made it. That means if I'm poking the bear and getting that kind of response, then obviously I'm saying something that's starting and promoting a conversation somewhere, which is fine by me. I think that's a really good thing. I think that when we don't talk about topics, that's when there's a problem. We need to air things openly. But also too, it raised an issue with me, which I'm just going to have a little spiel about, which I did record on my phone, but I can remember most of it anyway. And that is that I'm really disappointed in today's activists. And the handy helper got this over a morning coffee from me. But today's activists don't seem to be as committed to their cause as activists of old. So I'm a 1970s child. And I grew up with parents that were probably a little bit alternative lifestylers, is a good description. And he was giving me the death stares here. I wouldn't have ever said that my parents were hippies, but they certainly, they weren't going to go and live in a commune somewhere. But
had a very different way of doing things.
They had a different lifestyle to other people. And they were very committed to their cause of, having minimal transportation, growing our own food, living off grid. I mean, I can remember handing in homework when I was still going to school before I did correspondence. I handed in homework one day and it had candle wax on it. And my poor teacher had no clue. He was like, why have you got candle wax on your homework? And I'm like, because the generator ran out of fuel and mum and dad will only put a certain amount of fuel in the generator each day. And he was like, I'm sorry, why don't you have power? But my parents didn't have power. We did our homework by candlelight when the generator ran out. If we were still doing homework, we just had to finish it by candlelight. And they were very, very committed to their cause. We ate. I can remember going through a period of about 6 months where mum and dad did not buy anything other than toilet paper from the supermarket. We ate everything that mum grew, and mum was my mum's pretty handy in the garden, so we did have a good supply of vegetables and fruit. But I can remember eating river mullet. And if anybody has ever eaten river mullet, they will know what I'm saying when I say it's the muddiest fish in the world. We ate underground mutton, which is what we call in Australia rabbits.
Rabbits.
So we lived on kangaroo, rabbit, and river mullet for a period of about 6 months because mum and dad refused to spend money at the supermarket. And to me, that's committed to your cause. I don't know about everybody else, but I think that's when you've got 2 kids still living at home. My eldest brother had moved out, but me and my middle brother still lived at home. And to have a family surviving on that, that's a big commitment, isn't it?
Nothing wrong with you at all.
No wonder I'm like I am. But today's activists, to me, the way that I see it is they're not very committed to their cause. So this guy was having a go at me because billionaires should be allowed to fly jets and cows should not be allowed to burp. But his issue was that I was stating that cows aren't the problem, that billionaires are, and maybe they should cut back on their travel. And to me, that was like a no-brainer to start with because I'm like cows are good for the environment at the end of the day. Billionaires flying jets aren't necessarily good for the environment. But then I looked and thought, well, he's sitting there on a mobile phone using electricity, probably not wearing natural clothing that he's grown himself from a sheep or, I can't see anybody spinning their own cotton these days, although I can remember I do remember people who used to do it, or my parents also went through a phase where we didn't buy any new clothes. Everything came secondhand from Vinnie's because if the clothes were still good, we still wore them. I think they made a concession to underwear. We're allowed to get new underwear. But everything else was secondhand. And certainly as the youngest of 3, I wore boys' clothes most of the time growing up because I got hand-me-downs. But today's activists just don't seem to be really truly committed to their cause. They're still using mobile phones. They don't live in, a simplified lifestyle where they're not utilising all the pollutants that cause issues with the environment. But they're happy to get online and troll people and call them fat and nasty things, because they think that that's somehow contributing to their cause and making their cause better. And I'm really disappointed. I would like to see activists of today being a bit more committed. If your issue is climate change, well, hand over your phone, pack up and sell your car, go and live on a commune somewhere, grow all your own fruit and vegetables. If you're going to have a plant-based diet instead of a meat-based diet, go grow all your own fruit and vegetables. Get rid of live a lifestyle that doesn't require any medical treatment so that you're not contributing in that way. Don't fly anywhere. Don't drive anywhere. Don't train anywhere, although train's probably the least. I think train's probably the least one. But no heating and cooling. Heating and cooling is the big one. It's almost as big as transportation when it comes to climate change, fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions. So why aren't these activists living that kind of lifestyle?
They spin me a bit. They really do. Some of them.
Yeah.
We'll all jump in our cars and drive to a protest on
climate change
and fossil fuels.
Yeah. But they drove there in a petrol-powered car or a lithium battery car that had to be...
Oh, don't get me started on that bullshit.
That had to be mined out of a mine using fossil fuel-driven...
Yeah. Electric cars are fantastic. Yeah.
Well, look, it's great that we're thinking of alternatives, but Handy Helper and I have just been watching a series called Landman, and it's all about the oil industry. And, at the end of the day, I don't think anybody disagrees that fossil fuel usage is not the right way to go long-term for us. As a planet, we need to find an alternative. But Billy Bob Thornton's character that he plays in this series, he does a little spiel and, oh, my God, he hits the nail on the head.
I wish I could remember it.
It's gold. So it's something along the lines of, we know that fossil fuels are running out. We know that oil is running out, and we need to find an alternative. The problem is batteries and wind turbines, solar batteries and solar panels and wind turbines are not the best alternative.
No.
And we haven't come up with an alternative that is going to replace fossil fuels. And he goes on to say, and I don't know how much truth in this, but I'm going to guess that they did some research and it's correct. We're going to run out of fossil fuels before we come up with an alternative. Yeah. And then we're really screwed because we've got a whole bunch of industry that's based on fossil fuel usage to get power and energy to make and manufacture and heat and cool and do all these things. And we don't have the alternative, and we're going to run out before we get anywhere near making the alternative. So that's the big issue. And like we said, batteries, wind turbines are not the replacement at this stage. If they were the replacement, as he says, what's the big Exxon? Exxon is the big company over in the States. He said if wind turbines were the answer, Exxon would have a gazillion wind turbines going at the moment and using that if they thought that was the answer. But the stats are showing it's not the answer. It's a good alternative. It's not a great alternative.
The money, the cost, the outlay didn't give you the product.
No, you don't get enough.
You don't get enough of the
You don't get enough power
for what you've outlaid.
And I think he says in 120 years or in the lifetime of the wind turbine, it won't pay for itself.
Yeah, it won't pay for itself.
Energy, which is a real issue.
Yeah.
So, having said all that, we're now going to talk about a few myths that have kind of come up a lot in the media. After having this guy have a go at me, I thought it's really important that we address some of these myths because I think there's a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misinformation out there. And, I wish I could say I love science. I was a bit of a science geek growing up as a teenager. I wish I could say that science was infallible. But unfortunately, these days, science sometimes goes with the person who's paying the bill. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say that about all scientists because like any profession, doctors, teachers, police, ambos, anybody, shopkeepers, there's a percentage of the profession that are always a bit dodgy. But the vast majority of scientists are trying to do the right thing and trying to get the right information out. However, there are some unscrupulous people who would go with whoever's paying them to say whatever they want said. So let's run through. I've only got 4 myths, so hopefully we won't, even though you and I tend to gabber on, hopefully it won't go forever. But let's talk about our 4 myths. What's the first myth? Handy helper, can you read that?
I'm looking at
this one.
Hang on.
Have you not got your glasses
on? Agriculture is the leading cause of climate change.
Is it?
No. Not even close.
It's not even close. And this is the big one that the guy had the issue with me, that I was saying that cows burping were. Yeah, and I had a few people come back to me and say, well, cows burping are a problem, so we should deal with it. And I'm like, yeah, but shouldn't we deal with the bigger ones first? Shouldn't we try and reduce the emissions on the major ones first and then worry about cows burping later? And this all came out of the fact that, for those that don't know, there's a company that has come out with a product called Bovea 10. And Bovea 10 is a feed additive that's added to feedlot cattle or cattle that are being given pellets or grains or anything like in that, not grass-fed, so non-grass-fed cattle are being given this supplement, and the supplement is supposed to reduce the amount of methane being produced in their stomach, but it's chemicals, and there are alternative ways of doing it, aren't there? And you love the alternative, don't you? You think it's awesome. But so people think that cows burping is causing this huge problem. But let's be really, really realistic about it. The agriculture sector contributes, and I'm reading this directly, this is from an EPA, so Environmental Protection Agency report. Agriculture contributes 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. 10%. 10%. Yeah. And that's not cows burping, that's all of agriculture.
Yeah.
So that's your crop production for your soy milk and oat lattes. That
nut juice.
Your nut juice.
Yeah.
It is nut juice. It's not milk. Milk comes from mammals. So that 10% is everything in agriculture sector, not just cows. But what we really need to look at, and I've got a little diagram here, Handy Helper, which is easier for you to read even without your glasses on. 10% for agriculture, 28% for transportation. Now that includes cars, buses,
planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The next biggest one, oh my God, guess what the next
Surprise,
biggest one is?
surprise.
So handy, huh?
Yeah, electricity.
Yeah, electrical
Power.
25% of greenhouse gas emissions come directly from electrical power. Now, electrical power is different to other industries. That's just specifically electric power. So that's your running your air conditioner, having your that's not the industry. No, residential and commercial are your air conditioners and fridges. So, and I don't really know why they broke it up, because I kind of feel like they could add this together. But for those that want to know, the next one is industry. Now, industry is all manufacturing. So that includes the way that things are made, if plastics are being made, steel being made, all those kinds of things fall into industry. Logging would be in that. There is a section that they talk about in forestry, and that's not included in agriculture. But it's a separate amount, and that falls within the industry as well. So industry is 23%. So we've got transportation 28%, electric power 25%, industry 23%, residential and commercial. So this is people's houses.
We'll look at it in comparison, electricity industry and residential commercial.
Yeah.
There's 63% straight up.
Yeah, that's causing greenhouse gas emissions compared to 10% of agriculture.
10% of agriculture.
Now, residential and commercial includes your refrigerants. So I remember back in the early 90s, they talked a lot about refrigerants and using different kind of fridge sources. I don't know. Do you remember anything about that?
It's the chemicals that they use in the compressors in the fridge. 12A gas was the original one. Compressed gas in fridges, and then it went to a 134A, which is a bit different. Yeah. 12A gas is not really good for the environment.
It was something to do with gases, like so old refrigerators getting scrapped.
Yep.
And that was causing problems.
Yep.
Yeah. So they changed the refrigeration systems back, and I think it was the 90s. Could have been even in the 80s. I remember them talking about it. But in the 90s, it did a real big push, and you could go and buy a fridge. Like after a set time, they stopped using certain gases in refrigeration, and then you could buy a fridge that was supposedly greenhouse gas friendly.
Yeah, which is the 134A gas.
Which is your modern fridge of today.
Modern fridges, yeah.
Yeah, but that also, residential and commercial of 13%, also includes air conditioning and heating. Now, air conditioning and heating, and there will be people that talk about burning wood fires, but the thing is with burning wood fires is we can always grow more trees. So I have a bit of an issue. In Canberra at the moment, they're trying to reduce the amount of people that have wood fires. But at least with a wood fire, we can go and grow more trees. And we certainly have areas that we've reforested on our farm.
Yeah, big time.
So that for years to come, we will have timber to burn because we're off grid and we don't have a gas source and we don't have an electric source for heating, cooling, cooking, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we don't cut down trees. We only burn dead trees.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like we go for the dead trees first. You've cut down trees, but you've always taken the dead ones in the area first.
Yeah. But for every one that we take, there's probably about 15 to 20 regenerated off it.
Yes. Yeah, so, absolutely. So why methane gets the attention? So why is it that cattle, like when you look at that model that we just talked about, where it's only 10% of agriculture, why are cows getting all the attention? Why is it the cows that are the problem? And it comes down to methane, which is something that people don't necessarily understand, I think, in the way that they should. So cows, or livestock, or humans release methane. When you fart, you release methane.
Me?
Yeah, I know you never.
Never.
So greenhouse gas, though, when they release methane, the greenhouse gas, it's actually much stronger than CO2. But the difference with methane is it's really, really short term. So CO2 sticks around for centuries. It's there forever, basically, unless you find a way to reduce it. Methane lasts for about 12 years. So the cows aren't really contributing in the same way that people think they are. Yes, they are releasing methane, but that methane is not the end of the world. And I remember reading something ages ago that farmers don't have a problem with CO2 in the environment, or people that grow plants don't have a problem with CO2 in the environment, because CO2 in a greenhouse is actually a good thing and helps your plants grow. So, yeah. But that's the reason that cows get the really bum rap. But there are some things that you can do, and they're not bivay-10, which is a chemical. And, at the end of the day, we'll talk about, because the next topic...
It's only a new chemical too, so they don't even know what the long-term effects are going to be.
On the cow or on the people eating.
On the cow, on the ground, what's going to happen when we eat the meat. Actually, or whatever.
That's a really good point. I wonder what happens when they eat bivay-10 and then shit on the ground. Is there chemical still in the poop in the middle?
That's what I mean, because they don't release or let you know any of that information.
No. So, the Department of Ag have said it's safe to feed to cattle.
Yeah, we've heard that before.
But yeah, and the thing is, you kind of go, well, how safe, and how do we know? Like, what tests have been done?
Yeah, they don't give you that information.
No,
that's the one thing that
they don't. There is a couple of things though that can be done that are non-chemical. And this is something that's been studied over the last probably 10 or 15 years. I've seen research on it. And that is, what is it that we feed the cows? That you said you wanted to get an IBC and fill it full of that and water to feed to your plants?
Yeah, seaweed. It's the best stuff ever.
Yeah. So seaweed fed to cows, there's a study. There is an actual study.
They actually love it.
Yeah.
They love it.
Yeah. Well, they're the ultimate plant processors, aren't they? They are designed to eat plants and to convert them into other stuff. So I will link, there is a university that did a study on this, and I will link it. I think the study was done in New Zealand, I want to say, because they have lots of access to seaweed and lots of cows in New Zealand. But feeding cows certain types of seaweed has shown to cut their methane emissions by up to 80%. That's huge.
Yeah.
Considering they're...
I'm not eating seaweed.
Well, but you're not a cow. But considering how all of agriculture is only 10% of greenhouse gases, and people have such a thing on methane, cutting it by 80%.
It's massive.
That's huge.
It's massive.
And this is the thing. I think what people don't realise is that farmers aren't out to ruin the environment, because without the environment being healthy and clean and functioning, they can't do their job. So farmers are actually going out of their way to try and find out this kind of stuff and trial running things. My next door neighbour has managed to sequester carbon back into his soil at a rate that hasn't been seen anywhere before. And there was an article done on him in one of the local newspapers because he's made such an impact.
It's amazing to know that somebody who has 400 acres full of fine merino sheep can have a zero carbon footprint.
Yes, he's actually reversed. So
he's reversed it.
He's carbon not neutral but positive. He's gone the other way. He's doing so well that he is helping his surrounding environment sequester more carbon, which is awesome that he's gone to those efforts. But I guess the point of that first myth is agriculture is not the major culprit when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions.
Think of it this way, to put it into perspective. We'll have a conference on climate control, but we'll have it in a country that's out in the middle of nowhere, and we'll all fly our jets there and have a conference and say how bad the cows are with burping for the environment.
It
blows my mind. It really does.
It's to us, because we look at it and go, well, why didn't they catch the train there?
Why can't you do it on the video link?
Video link and have nobody travel.
I don't know. It baffles me. It blows my mind.
We do a lot of stuff on video link, don't we?
Yeah, heaps.
Yeah. Because why travel if you don't have to? Anyway, so you ready for our next myth?
It's my rant done.
Yes. So, and I have no doubt that when I post this on social media, I'm going to get a shit tin of, oh my God, you're just being mean. The cows are the enemy. The cows are what's causing the problem. If that's the case, can I just say the chances of you convincing me that the cows are the problem is 0. 3 parts of fuck all.
Yep.
So you got no chance of convincing me of that, and you can try your hardest to try and convince me, but you're not going to convince me. I've seen too much evidence to the contrary. So Number 2, organic farming doesn't use pesticides or synthetic fertilizers. So does that mean you can buy your oat milk latte knowing that all those animals that died from natural causes?
Yeah.
Not from pesticides.
Yeah.
So organic farming must be natural completely, right?
Yeah, right. Sure. No.
Organic farming does have things that it's allowed to use, and some of those things are not what you'd expect. So they're usually made from natural materials, but being certified organic does not mean that there's no pesticides or synthetic fertilizers used. In fact, a lot of organic farms use a shit ton of synthetic fertilizers. Because they, especially if they're crop farming, and we've talked about this from a regenerative agriculture perspective before, if you are using rotational grazing and using your livestock to add manure and urea to your soil and using them to cut down your grasses, but then rest the grass while the nutrients are soaking into the grass and soil, then you will have a healthier, more diverse soil. When you row cropping and you are growing just corn, just oats, just barley, just wheat, you can't have cattle coming in and doing that. You can under certain systems, but the people that are doing it in that row cropping system where they're just doing bulk crop production can't do the same things that regenerative agriculturalists can do with livestock rotational grazing. And so the soil health gets depleted.
It does.
And it
sucks the life out of it.
We've talked about it as far as using crop rotation in the veggie garden, haven't we? Because there's certain systems that you can, and I'll have to I might do another episode on it one day about how to move your crops around. So there's certain things that you have to put after other things. So if you've had potatoes in the ground, you may not be able to put tomatoes straight into the ground after the soil's had potatoes because the potatoes might have depleted the nutrients out of the soil. But then there's other things you can plant there that'll encourage the nutrients to come back to the soil and improve the health of the soil. When people are row cropping, that doesn't happen. Soil dies. And people don't think of soil as alive, do they? I mean,
no,
you probably, it was a big learning curve for you when we were learning about soil and stuff.
Yeah.
Here, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
You don't think about it as a living being, but there are so many microorganisms that live in soil. And if you don't keep the soil healthy, it can't then produce a plant that's healthy.
Yeah.
And there's people that talk about biodynamic farming. Biodynamic's a bit woo-woo for me. I don't understand it all. But it seems to work for a lot of farmers. So there must be something in it. But to be organically certified doesn't mean that you can't use pesticides or synthetic fertilizers. It just means that you have to use the ones that they've recommended. So I've got a couple of examples here. One of the most commonly used organic pesticides is copper sulfate. I didn't know that. Copper sulfate, isn't that what we were trying to feed the goats to? You do. Yeah. If goats can be deficient in copper.
It sounds really weird, but it's to us, it's poisonous.
Yeah.
Copper sulfate can kill you.
Because it said on the packet when I was getting it ready for the goats, it says to wear gloves, and I didn't wear gloves, did I?
Yeah. Blue fingers. Yeah. It's poisonous to us, but it's really good over time and stuff like that in the ground. It breaks down so well.
Yeah.
It's and the same with the animals. We're feeding it to our goats because they were lacking in copper.
But you've got to have they've got to have copper sulfate in their diet, haven't they? Yeah.
Yep. You don't feed it like feeding the chooks. It's the littlest amount that goes in.
But the issue was that if there's not enough copper sulfate in the soil, then the grasses don't have it in them. And when the goats eat
the goats eat and the cows eat, they're not getting enough. Yeah. And our area here, where we live,
is a little bit copper deficient.
It's copper deficient, yeah. So
it's very effective against fungal diseases. So it can be used as a fungicide, I guess would be the correct way of putting it. However, if it's overused, and we found this, unfortunately, I shouldn't smile because we lost a goat and we think we lost the goat.
I don't know. It was a hit and miss. There was a lot of issues.
We actually had an autopsy done with this one at the vet because we really were at a loss as to what had gone wrong. She got sick very quick and fell over very quick, and she was reasonably healthy. But there was a talk of possibly a little bit of overdosing on copper. And according to the Journal of Environmental Management, it can build up in the soil and be really, really harmful to the beneficial microorganisms that live in the soil. So you can overdo it and kill your soil, essentially, even though you're trying to improve it. It can have very long-term negative effects. So it's something that needs to be really studied well and really considered well. But when you read a packet of something and it says organic, organic wheat, don't think for a second that means there was no additives, because there very well would have been additives.
100% guarantee there was.
There are pesticides that they use that are fairly natural. I can never say the word pyrethrin, or it's the stuff you use to get rid of nits out of kids' hair without putting chemicals in.
I can't remember.
You know
I know what you mean.
Yeah, and so they do use that as a natural pesticide. But that being said, it's still an additive. You're still adding something to the plant or to the soil to try and get rid of the pests. So organic doesn't always mean what people think it means. It's a bit like, and we've had this conversation before, haven't we, Handy Helper? What's the difference between cage eggs, barn-raised eggs, and pasture-raised eggs?
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Pasture-raised is far better.
Yeah.
Because
how does the chook live in a pasture-raised environment?
Free.
Yep. Can go in and out whenever they like.
Whenever they like. They're not indoors all the time. If they want to go indoors, if it rains, if they want to go out, whatever, it doesn't really matter.
And what about a cage-raised
chicken doesn't go anywhere apart from
lives in its little tiny cage.
0.5 cage.
Yep.
And then
But barn-raised must be better. I mean, if I'm eating barn-raised eggs, surely barn-raised eggs must be so much better than caged.
It's just about as bad as a caged egg.
Why? How much? But they have access to the outside.
No, they don't.
No, they do. It says it on the packet.
It says it on the packet. Yeah, so, by law, it's 1 metre by 1 metre square outside a shed is all they need to be classed as a
barn raised.
Barn raised or free range.
That's so much better than cage, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No. So even though it says organic on the label, just do your homework with that. Because they have to list it somewhere, but also do your homework in your country. So USDA is American. For Australia, it would come from the Department of Agriculture. And in the UK, I don't know who would do it over there, but check to see what they consider to be organic. Yeah. If you're really interested in living, and buying organic products, check what their version of organic is for your country, because it'll vastly differ.
There's so many different things and labels and bits and pieces that people put on to make it look fantastic, but it's not. The U-Butte, for the Australian people listening, the U-Butte Australian-made emblem that used to go on everything was actually owned by a Chinese company.
Yeah, and you had to pay them a fee to put the emblem.
Australian-made and made in China, but it had Australian-made on it.
But remember, we've talked about what made in a certain country means. So there's a particular handbag manufacturer, I won't name because I don't want to get sued.
Unless they want to send freebies.
Yeah, unless they want to send freebies. Not really into my handbags. But a handbag manufacturer that puts on there is made in Italy. And then I found out from a friend of mine who works in manufacturing that the handbags are sent from China to Italy pre-made. So the handbag is made, but the handle is not attached. When it gets to Italy, in a little sweatshop, a Chinese person, more than likely, not an Italian person, attaches the handle to the handbag, and they can classify that as made in Italy. So, yeah, I'd take it with a grain of salt. So the next one, we need to get along because we're dragging that out. Now, again. I don't want to talk about this one next. I'm going to go to the next one next because we'll brush over that reasonably quickly, and then I want to come back to the last one, which is really important. Right. Factory farms are the primary contributors to environmental pollution. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not pro-factory farming, not in any way, shape or form. However, there are some things that to feed a lot of people quickly, factory farming works. Pigs are a classic example, and anybody who's kept pigs, and if you haven't kept pigs, go and watch, what's Jeremy Clarkson's show? what's his farm show?
Diddley Squat.
Diddley Squat. Go and watch that, and you'll see just how hard it is to raise free-range pigs.
Yeah.
Free-range pigs kill their babies. They roll on their babies. They don't feed them. They kill them. They eat them. Disgusting as it sounds, they do. So there are some circumstances where to get the amount of food that we want out of a particular industry, factory farming works. I don't like it. I would rather buy free range or pasture raised. Now that we know what free range actually stands for, I would rather buy that given the option for my family. But that not everybody can afford to spend the extra money that it costs to buy for a pasture raised food item. So the myth, what people believe, is that factory farms are the biggest source of pollution, especially water and air pollution. Now, what I found was that there are a couple of things that we need to understand, and that is that other industries like urban wastewater and industrial runoff play a larger role in impacting our waterways than factory farming ever can come close to. And there was a published paper done by Stanford University, which I don't know the universities in the US, but I'm going to guess Stanford's a pretty good one because I've heard of it before. And it found that urban wastewater and industrial pollutions were far more disruptive to the water supplies than factory farms were. I'm going to believe them. They're saying that manure runoff from farms is what people are most concerned about, and that's just not a problem at all. So, yeah. Now, another thing that we need to note is that some of these factory farms are really trying to kind of grab it by the short and curlies and fix the problem. They can see that they are a contributor to the pollution, so they're trying to fix it before it becomes out of control. There is a company called Smithfield Foods that I found that's a major pork producer, and they have already invested in some methane capture technology, and that technology turns methane emissions from manure lagoons, which
sounds so enticing.
No, manure lagoons.
Going swimming there.
Let's face it, any livestock shits. And if it shits, there's manure, and you've got to do something with the manure. And in a factory farm situation, the manure is not spread across the soil like it is with rotational grazing. It's all in one spot, condensed. So they got their methane emissions from their manure lagoons and turned it into renewable energy. How clever is that? It's like a biogas. If anybody hasn't seen the biogas things, I want a biogas thing, but where we live, it's too cold and we need to build a house around it. But you put your scraps and manure and human waste into the biogas machine, and it makes natural gas for you to cook on. How awesome is that?
Yeah.
Anyway, so while factory farms are not innocent, they're definitely not the biggest polluters, and because they're trying to make an effort,
trying to find new technologies and new ways to do stuff.
Yeah, they're trying to reduce their impact, which is an awesome thing. So that I just want to touch on that briefly, because the last one I think is probably one of the most important, and that's this one here. Andy Helper. Industrial agriculture is necessary to feed the world's population. Now, I hear this all the time, that particularly because of our carnivore lifestyle, people go, oh, but to make enough cows to feed the world, we can't do that. We don't have enough farmland.
Bollocks.
How much vacant farmland do we have?
In Australia?
How much farmland do we have that's not suitable for cropping?
Yeah, but would be sufficient for cows.
Cows can walk across rocky outcrops. They don't care. They're not a tractor. They're not going to get bogged on a rocky outcrop. They're not going to, it's a bit damp around the edge of the dam. I can't plant anything here. No, they just walk through it. They don't care about the mud. There is so much land that doesn't get used that can be used. But the important bit is, let's have a look at the stats. Okay, so the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, which, I'm not a fan of the UN at the best of times. I think they have an agenda, and that agenda isn't always in line with what most people would want their agenda to be. However, this is from their stats. So they show that regenerative and small-scale farming can produce enough food while supporting biodiversity and healthier ecosystems. That's from the UN. Yeah, who want us all to eat plants. And, So they did some studies, and these studies have come from Oxfam. So Oxfam is, from memory, is the people that do the assistance to countries that are third world countries. So a lot of countries in Africa, where they assist small producers to make items that can then be sold in Oxfam shops in order to get income back to these small producers. So they're helping people that are small businesses, essentially. In parts of Africa, intercropping, so growing different crops together, and crop rotation, what we talked about as far as soil health, have doubled the yields in some areas without the need for synthetic fertilizers. How good would that be? You don't need to worry about organic labeling. It's just crop rotation and intercropping, and it causes the soil to be healthy enough to do it without the fertilizers being needed. And that's from an Oxfam report, and I will put the link to that in the show notes, because I find that very interesting, that organisations that perhaps aren't always pro livestock farmers are coming up with this information showing that doing intercropping, crop rotation, doing regenerative agriculture and small scale farming is actually producing enough food to feed people. In India, there was a zero budget natural farming organisation movement that's helped 500,000 farmers boost productivity while cutting costs. Now, India, I think, has the second highest population in the world under China, maybe.
Something like that.
And the fact that they are feeding all of their people, and I'm not saying there's not poverty and malnutrition in certain areas where people aren't having enough to eat. However, if you have the second highest population in the world and you're able to feed them based on small farms, that's got to say something. Now, I get a bit antsy about the whole what's the guy, the Bill Gates. I was just going to say the computer guy.
I nearly said wanker then.
He famous for computing, famous for what was it, Microsoft. But he's now moved into farming, but he's moved into farming in a weird kind of way.
Yeah, farming in a laboratory.
Yeah, which makes me a little nervous. He's been promoting LabMate. He's currently here in Australia, or his company, is working here in Australia to produce genetically modified mosquitoes up in Queensland. And I don't really understand why he's moved into that kind of field. I'm not sure what the benefit is of the genetically modified mosquitoes. Are they not spreading malaria or Ross River fever or any of those diseases that they spread normally? If so, fantastic. If we're contributing to people's health, no problem at all. But I don't know why they did it. Evidently, his company did it over in Africa, and there was a huge issue where it backfired and the mosquitoes went crazy and were actually spreading worse illnesses than what they were supposed to be preventing. So kind of keeping my ear to the ground on that one. And if anything comes out of it, I'll let you all know. But it bugs me when people go into farming.
Good pun.
Oh, bugs me. I didn't even think of that. It does irritate me when people go into farming who've never farmed, and all they're trying to do is prevent people farming and make things in a lab. Like, what's wrong with the natural version? The natural version.
You know what I say? I'm going to swear, and I don't really care.
I always put explicit on there anyway.
Why fuck with Mother Nature?
Yeah, exactly. Mother Nature knows what she's doing. She. Because, men don't have babies. So I don't understand the need to make fake food. I don't understand the need to produce food in a lab when we can grow it very well on our own. Now, he does a lot of times talk about the fact that we don't have enough land, we don't have enough resources to grow our own food, but we clearly are feeding the amount of people that we have in the world. And like I say, there are some areas where there is drought and a lack of food, but there's areas where there is an abundance of food.
Yeah.
How much shit do we see get thrown out?
Yep.
And anybody that works in a supermarket or a restaurant will tell you how much food goes in the bin that's wasted food. You see nasty little stories all the time of food not being bought by supermarkets because the apples had brown spots on them, or they had misshapen carrots, so nobody wants to buy them. We have more than enough food, and we are able to produce more than enough food. It's a huge myth that we are not able to produce enough food for the entire worldwide population on the ground that we currently use for farming. I think we just need to be more realistic and maybe just a little bit more efficient about how we use the produce that we're actually growing. I mean, why throw out 2 tons of mangoes because they're not the right colour?
It's a waste. It is such a waste.
Well, feed it to something. Feed it to cattle or pigs
feed it back to cows or something.
Yeah,
pigs, whatever.
We were listening to that book in the car the other day on milk that the guy from Tasmania wrote. And I'll try and link that into. I might even do a whole episode on that. The book was amazing.
That's pretty good.
And he talks about the fact that skim milk used to be, back in the day, when a mum, usually the mum was the milker of the family, would milk a cow. She'd skim the cream off, and the cream and butter was considered to be the quality product. Everybody wanted it. Everybody wanted the butter. Everybody wanted the cream. The skim milk that was left at the end, they used to call it pig swill.
Pig swill.
Because it was fed to the pigs, because nobody wanted to consume it, because it had no nutrients and no goodness in it. And they would use it as a bulking agent for the pigs. So they'd mix it in with the fruit and veg that didn't make it to the table or was going a bit soft before it was cooked.
Yeah, grain mash, all sorts of stuff. They'd mix it with everything. They'd mix it
with and feed it to the pigs. So I don't understand, if we've got all this excess food that keeps getting thrown out, why we're not utilising that in a better format, and why we still keep saying we don't have enough food to feed the population of the world.
Plenty of food.
Yeah.
It's got to use it properly.
So I will link, that's it for today. I will link all of the reports that I talked about into the show notes, so you can go and have a look for yourself. If you disagree with any of these, sure, let me know. But
I guarantee you will.
There'll be people out there that disagree 100%. And you know what? Great. You go do your research. Come back to me. A guy actually
give me ideas if you got better ideas.
Well, a guy sent me something the other day about, I didn't know, it was the repopulation project or depopulation project. And I've never spoken to this guy before. He's not one of my followers. You know, he obviously, I think he is now. He liked a video that I posted to TikTok, and he sent me a link and said, hey, you should go read this article. I love it when people do that. If you have an article that you think I should read or that you think is valuable to others to get out there, post it on my social media and say, hey, CJ, check this article out, because I will go and read it. I geek out on that shit, which is pretty nerdy, but I find it really interesting when somebody does flick an article to me and say, read this, see what you think. This guy sent me this article. He didn't send me an article. He said, Google it. I went and Googled it. I got a couple of different articles, but it gave me a gist of what he was talking about. And I sent back to him and said, thanks so much. Like, I had never heard of that. It was a bit depressing that they're trying to depopulate the world so that they have enough food to feed the world. And I'm thinking, but we have enough food. And I don't understand. And that's what led me to, between the troll telling me I was fat, I can always lose weight. I don't know what he's going to do about his personality, but, you know, I'll lose weight. It's not going to change his personality. But this other guy sending me this link to say, read this article was awesome. And so if you have anything like that, send it to me. The Handy Helper hates reading news articles.
Yep.
But I will force him to read them as well.
Yeah, sure. Best of luck with that.
All right, let's be done for today, because we've got to go and go for a swim, because we're both doing physio at the moment.
We're both gimps.
Yeah, we both are limping still.
Yep.
All right, everybody, have a awesome week, and we will talk to you all again next week. Say bye for now.
Say bye for now. Cheers, guys.
See ya. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. From all of us at Mojo Homestead, we really hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, I ask just one small favour. Please subscribe and leave a review. Reviews help small podcasts like mine be more visible, so more people will know about us and be able to listen in. And don't forget to head over www.mojohomestead.net/launch and check out our freebies. We love helping families start their homesteading journey. Remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.